Hello, Yvonne. You look so beautiful.
Thank you, guys. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing, Alex?
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing well. How about you? It's good to see you.
Well, I'm good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, you look good. Thank you so much.
Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for saying yes to us for this conversation and, having time for us, and so we can share this space with everyone, with you. The stories we're about to tell, they're not easy to tell. Yeah. So it's always an honor that,
we have people.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. I think a lot of, well, I mean, maybe I'm wrongly assuming, but not a lot of people are aware of the sort of the starting points of a genocide. These things are generally these far off events that most people in the world will look at and be like, obviously it's a terrible thing that's happened, but unless you have experienced it or you know people directly who've gone through these things, it is, it's just this sort of abstract thing, right? And so there's a sequence, I think it's a list, like the 10 steps of genocide. I'm new to it. I mean, I've just started to really question like what it is and be introduced to the concept. But in your words, how do these things start, and how does a genocide begin?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the question. And yes, it is not easy to try to put yourself in the shoes of a genocide survivor or a Holocaust survivor, as long as you're not really directly connected. It's going to be very difficult for you to relate. You might be empathetic, but it's going to be very difficult for you to relate. So with maybe 10 stages of genocide, how can we put that into Rwanda perspective? And when I say Rwanda, I'm trying not to say Rwandan genocide because it's not Rwandan genocide. It's a genocide against the Tutsi. Now, if we put these stages into Rwandan perspective, let me maybe help you understand. The first stage, it's called classification. If you didn't know, you have to remember that back in the history, the Belgians introduced the ID cards. And they were not like any ID. Here we have driving license, but it only has what? The basic information, your ID, your date of birth, the issued date, and those basic information that are needed. But for the Rwandan ID, there was also another very key component. That was ethnic, okay? Yeah. So whenever you have those ethnicity in the ID, it's easy for anybody to be able to tell people apart, because if my ID would have said Tutsi, and thank God I never had to get that ID with the Tutsi in it, but I know my parents had it. I know my uncles and aunts had it, and my grandparents and all. But that was already classification, because with that ID, it's an official document already stating, oh, this one is a Tutsi, and that one is a Hutu, and that one is a Twa. It's as simple. Now, when you say symbolization, which is a second stage, of the genocide, in Rwanda, there was not so much of any thing they'll make Tutsi wear like Jews, but it's simple. Whenever you have that Tutsi in your ID, it wasn't only in ID, by the way. For those who don't know, I don't think Dizine had to experience that, but for us growing up, we had also ethnic classification or ethnic class in any educational documents. So I remember when I was finishing my primary school, I had to pick the majors I would like to do when I go to high school, because you had to pick those. You had to pick those by the time you are preparing to take the final exam, like for the primary school. And guess what? Those ethnic groups, they were there as well, Alex and Didin. I'm sure you didn't have.
No,
you didn't just go through that.
Genocide, yeah.
So you understand, when you have ethnic groups on the educational documentation, it's a symbolization, if you ask me, because this person with ethnic that is not wanted or shouldn't be allowed to do A, B, C, D, then it's easy for whoever is working in the education to be able to say, okay, this one belongs to the category of population that should not be able to access to this, to amount to this. That's why we would choose, I'm sorry?
I'm saying it's easy to discriminate because you can pick and choose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I remember at the time I wanted to be a nurse. So I remember that the nurse option was the first one. But guess what? Tutsis were not allowed to be the nurses. So that one was, disqualified me automatically, because if somebody checked my documentation, the first thing they had to look at was, because it was at the first thing on the top of the documentation.
Yes.
So that, to me, it was a symbolization, and it kind of like falls and blends into the third stage as well, which is discrimination, because with that, every Tutsi was discriminated, based on whatever criteria they have already set and standards they have already set, set for Tutsis. With that, there was no way you could amount beyond the level they have already decided for Tutsis, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So that was something, and for those who did not experience it, the symbolization and the discrimination also came up during the time we grew up. I remember at the beginning of every term in school, they would ask, Tutsi girls to stand on one side, and Tutsi Hutu, the Hutu girls to stand on one side. The same thing for boys. But it was always like a shameful moment for Tutsis. I'm saying this because I remember having that feeling as a child. You have at least 50 kids in the classroom, and these are just kids. I'm talking about below 10. You ask them to stand up, and you have like 30 girls in a classroom, and you have like 20 boys in a classroom. But whenever they are being required to stand up, and Tutsi on one side and Hutus on one side, guess what? It has never been more than 2 boys out of 20 standing on one side as Tutsis. And you have another chunk of 18 standing on the other side as Hutus. Yeah. For girls, it has never been, at least in my classrooms, we have never been more, like max, we were like 3 girls on one side, and you have a chunk of 20-something girls of Hutus on the other side. If I'm going to go on a hunch here, because I don't remember what was the quota, but if I'm going to go on a hunch here, I'm going to say the quota of Tutsis in classroom, there were like 5 kids in every classroom. And if that was the quota, let me tell you, that's what we had to experience growing up. That means 7 years of my primary school. That's what I had to kind of like experience every time.
Wow. Before you go to the next phase of the genocide, the 10 steps to genocide, I'm wondering, when the first time you were asked to stand up and you saw it, did you understand? Did you understand that you were a Tutsi? How was the whole situation?
Well, this is something that is engraved in my memory, because I had just finished kindergarten in Kigali, and I was brought back to my hometown in Butare. And there I was already 6 years old, something, because my birthday is in October, and every year would start in September. So I was not even, actually I was not even 7 years old. I think I was 5 years something, going to 6. Number one, I was already younger for the age to start, primary school. But I was allowed that because there was a family member who had that power, extended family member who had that power to kind of like get me in school along with, my cousin. Yeah. So this was a school that my mom went through. And everybody, from in my family and hometown, local town that went through. So and it was a school with only 2 classes, first grade and second grade for that area. Now, these teachers, they had taught my entire family and my cousin's family as well. So they knew us very well. Now, they like, hey, you guys need to stand up. Hutu girls on that side and Tutsi girls on that side. Me and my cousins, we remained seated because we did not know who we were. Now, my cousin was mixed. I was not. So we remained seated, and the teacher looked us up.
People are watching. They might not understand mixed. They might think like, people are not wrong, and then they might think mixed is like, mixed race.
No, it's simple. My cousin, my aunt married a Hutu. So they were, it's like mixed both ethnic groups.
Mixed within tribes, yes. Ethnics.
And within ethnics. And for those who don't know about Rwandans, every child will take on the father's ethnic group. So that would be that would be a requirement. That means it's like here in America when you have a biracial child, white and the black. For some reason, I don't know, Alex can help me understand because I'll never be able to understand. But for some reason, they don't qualify them as biracial. It's always like black. Don't know why. Hey, Alex, when you get a chance, help me understand how that happens.
That's a deeper conversation.
Yes, we can get into it.
It's a conversation for another day.
Yes.
But in Rwanda, if a family was of a Hutu and a Tutsi all the time, and the father is a Hutu, the kids will be Hutus. But if a father is a Tutsi and the mom is a Hutu, then the kids will be Tutsi anyways. So the kids will always take on a father's ethnic group. So at that moment, me and my cousin, we grew up together. We were tight, and God knows we had no clue that whatever we were. So we are sitting, and we're sitting together, and the teacher looked at us. She was old enough to be our grandmother, and she looked at us and she was like, you go there, and you go there. So now she's pointing at the groups where we should join. And guess what? She's sending me in a corner where there is only one girl. And she's sending my cousin to the group where it's just a chunk of big, many girls there. And I'm like, why are you sending her there and you're sending me there? And she's like, because we grew up together. We were just cousins, and she and I, we are just a few days apart in our, in our birthdays. So that didn't make any sense at all. We looked at each other. We did not understand. And when she pushed us to go to those groups, she had to whoop us, like she had to spank us so that we can stand up and join those groups. So we did, and I remember when they are crying, and I came back. At that time, I used to suck my thumb. When I came back, I sucked my thumb, and then just said, I did not speak. After that, I did not speak. I remained quiet the remainder of the day. And the beauty of that day is that my uncle came to pick us from school. So as soon as he got there, my face was as big as like this. I was so upset. I was
oh my God, you're a 5-year-old yes.
I was very upset. My cousin, she was very upset because at that point in our minds, we were upset because they separated us. But also the one thing the teacher said that kind of like engraved in my brain was, if you don't know what I'm saying, how about you go and you ask your mother and your grandfather?
Wow.
I wonder why they didn't tell you. Now, remember, I'm 5 years, almost 6 years old. And she's telling me all that. So that remained in my mind. And as soon as we got in the car, my cousin looked at her father and she was like, why is she Tutsi and I'm a Hutu? My uncle was like, wait, what? She's like, oh, they made us stand up and they told her that she's a Tutsi and I'm a Hutu. What is a Tutsi? What is a Hutu?
Oh, wow.
My uncle looked at us. She was like, I'll be right back. He was like, I'll be right back. He got out of the car. He went to talk to the teachers. And we might not have been standing next to them to understand word by word, but we could tell that he was really pissed. We could tell that he was really pissed. And later on, what we understood is that he asked her why he made us stand up realizing that we did not understand why she did not, fill out whatever she had to fill out without making us stand up so that we can, join the groups when she realized that we did not understand. And apparently her answer was like, it's not my job to teach your kids, it's your job to teach them. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And that day I got home, I was still angry.
Yeah.
And I was like, the first person I had to talk to was my grandfather. I'm like, Grandpa, what is a Tutsi and what is a Hutu? And my grandpa was like, wait, what? I'm like, what is a Tutsi and what is a Hutu? And he's like, where did you get that? I'm like, they made me stand up in class.
Yeah.
And apparently I'm a Tutsi, but Mifik is a Hutu. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
He was like, don't mind those crazy ladies. Is that your teacher who did that? Don't mind them. But he was waiting for my mom to come home so that they can have that conversation.
Yeah.
So they didn't tell me much. If I'm being honest with you all, they didn't tell me much. The only thing they told me that night, it was like, the next time I'm being asked to stand up and join the Tutsi or the Hutu, I should join the Tutsi. That's it. It's not a big deal. So that's how I learned, to answer your question. And
Thank you for sharing.
as a 5-year-old, almost 6 years old, it's so engraved in my brain. It will never go away.
Yeah.
No, and that's one of those moments that, I mean, I'm sure it's not unique, but especially at that age, you learn exactly not only how traumatizing that could be, because there's like some public shame in there.
Yes.
But there's you also understand the social aspect of that, of what that teacher did.
Yeah.
She was reinforcing certain social norms that had been ingrained in her, and then in this case it was systemic. And it's crazy hearing that particular story. I think we all kind of have stories of kind of being ostracized and outed in that type of,
especially in this country.
well, particularly in the States, not to focus too much on that, but it's but like understanding what that event sort of precedes, that I think adds a little bit more context as to just how dangerous and how slippery a slope treating not only yourselves, each other, but children, because you learn from such a young age that this is how we treat people. So we categorize, and then we separate. We just make it easy for for a particular group to decide to do to make this choice to
exactly,
and feel entitled and allowed to make
and I don't know, I might have my own experience and everybody else has their own experience, but growing up, my entire primary school, this was something that will always, at this point in time, it will always make me very uncomfortable. Whenever I knew it was the time that we're going to have to stand up and do that, it was always uncomfortable. And funny enough, we have always been 5, never more than that. It was either 5 or less than 5, but we never been more than 5. And you just, every time we do that at the beginning of year, it will set the tone for the rest of the year.
I bet it would. I bet it would.
Yeah, because also that now, I mean, now as I think about it, you can imagine that's the beginning of the year, that your class, and it's in a whole classroom, and you're being, you're standing up like that. It means the students that you're in this class with, you already separated. You're already mentally, you're already different. Yeah.
There is no confusion. There is no confusion about who is who.
No, yeah.
And that means if you're gonna make friends in that class, then you know who you need to make friends with.
Yes.
And who you shouldn't make friends with.
Oh, and that, yeah.
Wow.
And imagine, we could go on this one for a long time, but what's the next one?
Yes.
So,
because
you understand that
each other.
Yes. it did. And for us Rwandans, when you think about the symbolization and discrimination, honestly speaking, it falls very smoothly into stage 4, which is dehumanization, because like we just mentioned, whenever we had to stand up at the beginning of the year, then it was easy for people to know who is who, and it was easy because if Hutu kids will pick on you, most of the time the teachers will not do anything about it. They will then pick on you. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, what kind of dehumanization you need to have for a child? I'm talking about a child growing up.
Yeah.
You know, what else do you need when it comes to dehumanization? Because they are calling that child names, they are picking on her, they are bullying her, and there is no an adult there to stand up for that child.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about trauma, just think about that moment, you know, think about that moment, how this child is going to feel.
Yeah.
You know, that's the moment, that was the time, Deja, I'm sorry, already, that that was the time already that Tutsi kids start to understand that they're worthless.
Yeah.
If you could understand that.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
So that was the beginning of reminding them that, hey, you're nothing. I can beat you up and no teacher will do anything, even if they wouldn't say that per se, but that was literally the meaning, because they will beat you up, they will bully you, and nobody will do anything.
Yeah.
And it's
so to me,
ideal.
Yes. So to me, that was dehumanization, which will start at that point, and moving upwards. You find Tutsi they didn't have education, therefore they couldn't have, they couldn't be able to get into better jobs. They couldn't be able to kind of like build equity or anything. That's why before genocide, you find many Tutsis into low jobs, like low quality jobs, and those who did not do those, I'll say, jobs that are not so much of a respected caliber, there will be business owners. But again, being a business owner, they had to pay for people for protection, or for them to keep, having their business, standing. So that tells you how much Tutsi had to work hard to make a living. Because if you're not allowed to have a stable and a steady education, that means you're not going to be able to build the equity for your family. You're not going to be able to build, there's not going to be a time or access to financial literacy, really. So your economy, you're not going to be able to build any type of economy for yourself, which you can also leave behind for your kids. But Tutsi, they kind of pushed through. Some of them, they were able, for example, my father, maybe it also had to do with his handicap. He was able to go through primary school, high school, and in 1973, that's when at the time they called Iringaniza, which was the time they had to make sure that any Tutsi who slipped through the cracks is expelled, from college. That's when my dad was expelled from college. He was a sophomore at that time. But I think he has been overlooked, maybe because of his handicap, But most of the Tutsi who go, who slip through cracks, and just get to the level of college, most of them, they were just, they got kicked out at that point. And most of them, those who could be able to kind of leave the country, they went in exile, they were able to go to college, in colleges, outside of the country. But for those like my father who could not, that's when they took the route of, teachers, teaching high school.
Yeah.
Wow.
But exactly.
This was happening everywhere.
Yeah, if the whole country.
Throughout across the country, yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you understand, my father got kicked out of college. That was many years before I was born, almost a decade before I was born.
Right.
So
Wow.
It's not something that started at that time when I was born. So that's humanization to me, which kind of builds up into organization. That means everything that they did amounted to organizing themselves, because you are organizing, you're teaching the Hutu who they are, what is their position or place in the society, which is like, you guys are the powerful, you guys are the worthy, the Tutsi are not, which means you can, I mean, because I remember the theme or the say was, if you give them a moment to slip through the cracks, they will build themselves and we won't be able to escape. So that means they will just colonize us again. Why and how, God knows. I'm not going to be able to explain that, because that's a whole conversation for another day. But that was the hatred built among the Hutus, you know, to be always on their toes and to make sure that there's no Tutsi who should be able to build themselves. Because if they do, then it's a time for them to unite and again colonize the Hutus. Truth to that, I don't think there is any. But if somebody's telling you, hey, be aware, if you allow that person to get stronger, that person is gonna just, you know, put you down. That is the instinct, you know, for anybody to be like, oh no, I'm not gonna allow that person to even breathe if I can.
Yeah.
So in my perspective, that built into organization, because when you are educating people, when you know, it's like, you know, it's like really feeding that thought into somebody's mind from the get-go, and they get to a point where they feel like, okay, this is me, and my position is to be on the top, and that person shouldn't. And that's where Hutus understood that they have the power to eliminate them, to keep them down. So that's the organization for me. That's where, so like that was part of the organization, you know. Now the polarization became really a serious issue back since 1990, because that's when the RPF, you know, started the attempt to kind of like, okay, now we're going to push back. But I didn't talk about all those wars that happened back in 59 when they killed all the Tutsis and they burned their houses, and most of the Tutsi, you know, fled the country, and it didn't stop there. They continued to kill them back in 60, 61, 62. We got so-called independence, but again, they didn't stop killing them. And every time Tutsis try to come back, they'll kill them, and they'll kill those who are trying to come back, and they'll kill those who are in the country. That was also 63. Now, a little bit of a break comes 73. Okay. 73 wasn't only, you know, making sure that there's no Tutsi who is, you know, in education or who's getting education, but there was also, again, killing Tutsi. So there has been exodus, like, for Tutsis all these years, from 59 up until 73. So that means there was never a time between that time where Tutsi felt comfortable, felt at ease, felt like at home or at peace. So there was always that feeling that, oh, we're gonna get killed any moment. And that was a truth, that was a reality. So between 73 and 90, there was that relative peaceful time. But who was the person enjoying the peace? Not the Tutsi anyways. It was just, you know, at the time where the Tutsi had to become, they had to kind of like, I would say, to give up, those in the country anyways, they had to give up any, you know, fight to say, okay, this is who we are, and we're done.
Like accepting the reality of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So accepting the reality for the sake of their family.
Right.
But there was no really, in my opinion, there was no peace per se, and there was nothing they felt they could do. But the Tutsi out of the country, they were also having their own problems, you know, because they were living in exile in those countries. And it's whenever you are a refugee in a country, I don't think there is any time ever that the host countries have ever felt, oh, we're so happy to have these refugees. We're gonna be friends with them, and we're gonna just, you know, protect them and, you know, help them to to flourish. I don't think there has ever been that type of, experience, which means Rwandans, wherever they were in those countries, that was also the struggle they were living through for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think they got to a point where like, okay, we're done. We're done sitting here. We're done being the pawns here. We are going to go back. We are going back to our country. We're going to find a way to return to where we belong. So that was 1990. So that's when RPF, started the attempt to come back in the country. The war was on the front line, but Tutsi had to pay the price again inside the country.
Yeah.
And I remember that was one of the time. I mean, I had my uncles being jailed as being called Jitso. That means the spies. And if I can tell you, they were not as such. They were not spies. It was simply because there were those Tutsis, most of them who have been able to go through the cracks and be able to get education, and now they were working in some, higher position in different companies, or they were doing businesses. So those are the people who got, imprisoned at that time.
Because they were spies.
Yes.
Yes.
And there were many people at the time, and if you think about what I just said, there was dehumanization that led into organization from the get-go for, over 30 years. Then the polarization came with the imprisonment of, Ibjito, quote unquote, but also with the new media that was as loud as as you can imagine.
Yeah, I thought you were going to
portraying. I don't know if Alex has ever been introduced to the Kangura newspaper. If he had not, Didin, you have a job there to do. Please find him a copy of Kangura, because I don't want to make any mess here, but if you could hear things that Tucker Carlson was saying with the January the 6th, that was nothing compared to what Kangura was writing.
But in the same vein, in the same, political,
So I'm giving you that perspective, just for you to be able to relate, just to have a little bit of like a comparison to what was happening.
Right.
So now,
most of journalists back then, they were not really journalists anymore. They were more of like political pawns in the 90s, as they were, spreading the hate and propaganda.
At that time, it was the time to spread the news to whoever who did not understand what needed to be done at that time.
Yeah.
So you have Kangura as a news, as a newspaper that was being read by anybody who could read. There was RTLM, Radio Television de Mille Collines. That was also Hatred Radio. Or I don't know if they didn't had a chance to show you what they called 10 commandments of the Bahutu. That was the 10 things that the Hutu were supposed to be aware.
Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Have you read them?
No, I'm not familiar.
I think he has read them.
No. I'm trying to keep up.
So Didin should be able to find you a copy for you to read those 10 commandments. That will give you a little bit of, a perspective on what Hutu is expected to do. And if you have a radio that broadcasts all that hatred, that is spewing that hatred on a daily basis, you have a newspaper that is reaching, far beyond only where you are. And you have like national news media that are not really neutral. They are kind of like biased in a way that also getting like into the propaganda. Then you understand it's hard for Tutsi to be portrayed as human beings, which goes back into dehumanization, because they were calling them cockroaches.
Right.
They were saying, oh, RPF, they're not humans. They're just, they have tails. So if you say that person it's not a person, this person has tails, then anybody who had no other notion of the reality, they'll be like, okay, this is not a person I can rely to. Then with that, also the propaganda was intertwined with preparation, because that's when they started to prepare for the genocide to occur. So that's when all those businessmen and the official governments and the military, high-ranking officers, they started to kind of like now prepare. They have a war. They're fighting with RP at the time, but then on the other side in the country, whoever is not fighting on the front line, they are just organizing themselves on how to kill Tutsis. That's why you have the trial back in 92, 93, where they had to see how many Tutsi that can be killed in 1 minute. So they were like, they were just doing conducting those trials. And when we say that they were conducting those trials, it wasn't quiet, because if you're gonna get into a village in Bugesera and burn the whole, you burn the houses and you kill Tutsis, the whole community, international community, was watching. It wasn't something that was done quietly.
Yeah.
Okay, but that was the trial. It was the trial to say, okay, if we're gonna kill them, how many can we kill in 1 minute? If I'm not mistaken, I think at the time they were counting to kill 8 Tutsi in 1 minute. Because if they killed 8 Tutsi in 1 minute, imagine in 1 minute how many Tutsi are gonna be killed in whatever, where they are. So that aspect of running trials with specific number of people to be killed in the specific amount of time gives you a hint of how prepared they were getting.
Yeah, when you run tests to see how efficient you can kill people, the efficiency, I mean that shows the level of preparation, the level of planning.
And you also are trying to do things in a timely manner.
Right.
It's not only I'm trying to see how efficient I can kill people, but I'm on the clock. I'm on a clock. How many people can I kill? So
all sounds
to me that was not only the pluralization and preparation and persecution happened literally all at once. If you ask me, it wasn't really separated, but that persecution went from abstract or a little bit quiet starting from 90, because that's when they start to kind of like accelerate what they're doing. And here comes 1994. That's the extermination. So
it's 4 years of kind of ramping up and testing and making sure that what you're about to enact has a good foundation.
I mean, they had the audacity of getting over 1 million machetes in China on the loan that they didn't even pay for.
Well, it's because that was the government. Because I don't know if you know this, Didin, but back in 61, 62, they removed Tutsis from Ruhengeri, from Gikongoro, and they removed them from their own homes, and they took them to Gesera so that they can be killed by Tsetse. So this was literally also exterminating people, but without really getting their hands dirty. Because the tsetse was just, an insect in the forest. So for them, they knew he gonna kill them, but they didn't want.
If it bites you, you will die. You will it's like Zika.
It was a viral kind of a thing. Whenever you got bit by tsetse, it was like, it will give you like a viral thing infection, and there was no cure for that. Now, they removed the Tutsi from their homes in different areas, and they took them to Bugesera. The pretext or the excuse was that there was a bigger land, and they wanted them to have more land.
Okay.
So if you have that excuse,
you might remember. I think I saw in some documentaries some of the political speeches. One of the guys, I don't remember who, might have been a prime minister or something, who said that if you want to burn like if you need a big pile to burn quickly, the grass, the dry grass or something. You remember the same
Yes.
thing?
That means if you
niba ushaka gutwika ubwatsi uraburundarunda ukabushyira hamwe ukabutwikira hamwe. I think that was in the speech.
Yes. So that was part of the propaganda back in between 1994, because what they meant, it's simple. Like, Alex, for you to understand, you see, whenever you have like the farmers, they have those piles of dry, I don't remember, it's called the hay, where they use it in the farms, right? So in the context of what they didn't say, in our country, they were like, if you want to burn much more hay, because it's dry and everything, so it's simple. You pile them up all together and you torch them, they're gonna burn right away, and they're gonna burn in a short amount of time.
So much fire to burn that whole thing at the same time. So you just do one.
That's why even you if you noticed during the genocide, they will bring Tutsis from different areas, and they'll just bring them together in one site to kill them. Because at the same time they were saying that they need to keep their stinking bodies in one place so that they don't smell to the other sides. So if we collect them and remove them from their homes and we put them in a designated area, then we're gonna kill them there, and it's far away area, so their stinking bodies not gonna bother nobody. So in their mind, there was I don't think they had ever anticipated their failure and, being defeated and just, having Tutsi being rescued in any way. In their mind, I think with the plan and everything they had already organized, I think they had, they thought and they believed that they'll kill every bit of last Tutsi, and there's no better way other than keeping them as far as they could keep them, But they didn't they didn't see or they didn't think there was any rescue possible for them.
Right.
I mean, I remember my aunt who fled with us. They told everyone that they should go to a Catholic church, a cathedral that was in our area, but everyone who went there was burned in that church.
Well, it's because the churches worked well back in 93. In 93, the churches worked well. So that means every Tutsi who ran to the church and they were able to find, safety in the church, nobody touched them. So I think this was, because the churches worked before. And the hope for the Tutsi also back in 1994 was like, okay, if this worked back in 73 and people they still had a respect for the church, the sanctuary, then we're still gonna be safe. But that was not the case, because this time the strategy and tactics had changed already. With the whole organization getting everything ready, making sure that every person who has to kill is prepared and ready with the machete and any other weapon they needed. So you understand that there was not much they couldn't do.
Right. Right.
So I'm gonna a little personal. Do you remember where you were on April 7th, or you were in Kigali? So that
I was in Kigali.
For you, it began on the evening of April 6th, 1994.
So, but 1994, I came to Kigali. I got there back. It was Friday. The Easter was on Sunday, so I got there on Friday because my mom was sick. So my mom, she had cancer, but at that time they had not diagnosed her already because she had build up water in her lungs, and they had to remove it. So at that point, they were suspicious that she might have cancer, but again, they had not, give her the diagnosis. They were focusing on removing the water in her lungs. So she was hospitalized. She was in a hospital in Kigali because I had 3 aunties in Kigali, both younger sisters to my mom. So they came, they took her. Now I was at school, but as soon as we had, our break, Easter break, I came to visit her. So I got there on Friday, and I was there on Saturday and Sunday. We had Easter. Monday. I remember Tuesday, the day the plane fell. I had spent the day with her, but she was with one of her sister, and I was living with the other. Or in Nyamirambo, she was at Mumena, but I was in Nyakabanda. Or in Nyamirambo, but kind of like a little bit, on each side of the road. So I was in Kigali when the genocide happened. And on the 7th, yes, I remember vividly everything, how it happened, where I was. And I remember everything from 7th, how I had to move around, how we had to hide my auntie, and how I had to get back to one of my other aunties that I stayed with during the most part of the genocide. I remember, this is something that is so funny because this is something that kept bugging me during the Gachacha time. I was like, there was this guy, I used to see him working at the TVR, like national television. He was a technician, I think. But I saw this guy during the genocide. I saw him on the street. I saw him holding a machete, but I didn't know him, which means I saw him as one of few people. And the reason why, the one feature that kept him engraved in my memory is he had big eyes and he had a very big gap in his front teeth.
Yes.
So that, I remember him speaking, and when I was passing by, I was, of course, younger, and I remember him also being young. He was older than me, but he was not old. Like, he was not married. I was 14 years old. So him, I don't remember. I couldn't tell how old he was, but he wasn't 14 years like me. So basically, I saw him, and every time I saw this guy, after the genocide, I always got scared, and people didn't know why. And I couldn't tell everybody because I didn't even know the name of the guy. I knew nothing about him. And it didn't feel like it would have been enough for me to say, oh, I saw that guy, during the genocide on the street with a machete. It would have not amounted to nothing really, because it's not like I saw him killing anybody. It's not like I saw him, doing anything that tangible. But during the Gachacha, I remember I always cover news where people are just, giving the news of what they did. And every time I saw him, I had that gut feel like, I don't want to be near you, because every time I see you, that's what I remember. But I saw him when I was leaving Nyakamanda, going back to my other aunt, that was April, I saw him April the 9th. It was a Saturday. I saw him. And I say this to say, being in an area that wasn't mine, the area where I didn't grow up, it was really a big, help for me. Yeah. It's one of the things that kind of like saved me, that kept me safe because nobody knew. Yeah. Then I got to my aunt. We were there for a few days. We got rescued by RPA, and we were taken to Rebero. Then when we got there, we had to take care of people who were being brought from Nyanza, site. Yeah. So because we got there on April 13 at night, and the killings in Nyanza, they had took place on the 11th. So basically, the RPA soldiers, they were bringing people who were still breathing after 3 days in the dead bodies, and they would bring people who were injured, still breathing. Most of them, they would die, in our hands, trying to take care of them. They will bring kids.
I'm like thinking you're 14 years old.
Yeah. This is one thing I always think about, and I'm like, we had to grow up very fast. So fast, so much so that to think about your age, to kind of like try to say, oh, I'm a child, I can't do this. That time wasn't there. That didn't matter anymore. Your age was not a factor. What was a factor was that you're here and you're healthy. Let me help you understand. We got to Rebero on April 13th. It's the middle of the night. Soldiers are taking a bath, literally, like a bunch of them in the swimming pool. It's in the middle of the night, it's dark, nobody can see one another, so that's how they taking a bath. Yeah. That was in the night. In the morning, we are told to go and wash our faces in that same pool.
Oh, shit.
By the fall night, we were not allowed to touch water because that was water, the cleaning water we had.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Water.
So when we got there, people were taking baths in the swimming pool water, okay? Because it was after the war and everything. Yeah. But in the morning, we were allowed or told to wash our faces from that swimming pool water, right?
Yes.
But the nightfall, we were no longer allowed to do anything in that water because that was the clean water we had.
How is it clean?
Oh, you are asking me if there was something done to clean the water?
Yeah.
No, but that was the water, the best water we had at that moment. If we're gonna just clean anybody, if we're gonna clean anybody, if we're gonna, cook. So they were boiling it before we would just fetch water in there and boil it.
Wow, yeah.
Before using it. So I want you to understand, the moment of feeling disgust of this, of that, it was no longer there. It was the survival mode, and that being, I used to say that we were spoiled. That's what I used to say. Being spoiled, being fancy and
milk, no. I mean, I'm talking about before genocide, all the spoiled. Yeah. So
basically, that was what we're doing. And I remember the first person they brought to me, they asked me to take care of. She died in my hands like 5 minutes later. She was a lady. They brought her to me. She was a lady, you could tell, very tall, very giant. She had a machete on both back of her neck. She had machetes on both back of her elbows. She had machetes like on both breasts. The breasts were not touching anymore. And she had a baby. And she also had like machetes on her thighs and everywhere. So at that time, what we were trying to do was kind of like to see if we can keep her, alive and just for her to get the treatment. She had her baby who was with her when they brought her, and the baby was trying to breastfeed, and nothing was coming out of the breast other than, blood. So we had to take away the baby, and I was taking care of her. And we had there were these kind of like drinks that we were giving, it was some type of powder. We'll just put it into a water, and it would become like sweet, drink. And I was trying to give it to her. Then she wouldn't swallow. And I called the soldier. I'm like, hey, she's not swallowing. What can I do? This guy, he came, he looked at her. He kind of like checked her, the neck, like to see if the purse is there. She's like, oh, she's dead. You take care of that one. That was it, And I don't want anybody to think, oh, we were no longer, being conscious of the human aspect of people. But the fact was, we had many people to take care of. And if this one had already passed away, there was no point for me to stay there with her, That means she is gone, unfortunately, but there is another person who's still breathing that needs to be taken care of. You understand?
Yeah.
So that was the situation. Yeah. And me being 14 was not really the point. The point was, are you able to do something? Are you able to help?
Yeah. Did you know, were you by yourself there with your family, your mom?
I was with my family. I was with my aunt's family. So I was with most of my cousins. I remember one of my cousins, he was 17 years old at the time, and they brought this woman to him, and they asked him to take care of her. And this woman, she had machetes everywhere, including her private parts, and they asked my cousin to kind of like clean all the way. And he was like, I can't. Then they were like, no, you're gonna do it because you're the one right here. So no excuses.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we will have to deal with. But we dealt with it feeling so, I don't know, it was the moment to be like, this is what I need to do right now. It has to be done,
It has to be done. There's no time to think. You just have
No,
to.
there's no time to think, no time to waste.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
So, yeah, that was stage 9. That was 1994, and now, God knows, we are in the last stage of genocide. We are in denial.
Yeah.
People are working so hard
Now
to make the genocide against the Tutsi
Yep.
not being acknowledged
Of the
as such.
genocide against the Tutsi. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked if the baby survived. The last time I saw the baby was alive, but don't ask me what happened after that,
baby?
because
Wait, which baby?
the baby of the lady they asked me to take care of.
So when the soldier said the baby was dead, it was not.
No, the mom was dead. The baby was
alive.
they had already taken her.
They took the baby. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last time you saw the baby was
When
alive.
they took the baby alive.
It was before I got shot. So I got shot on April 18th, and I had to be removed from the bureau. So I didn't see the baby afterwards.
You got shot.
But yes.
You said you got
genocide. So genocide was still going on. As she.
Yes.
Yeah. I know she did. It's yeah.
Alex, don't see me laughing.
You're going to traumatize.
No, I'm not traumatized.
No, I'm kidding. But yeah.
It's like, I mean, I think I'm a good example here, having not gone through anything remotely close to that. I'm just trying to follow along and not necessarily put my shoe, what's the phrase? Put myself in your shoes in that way, but just understand that this stuff, it's real.
Yeah. And even seeing her here smiling, it's like it's what happens, you're smiling and then we share this story, and but I'm glad you're here and alive.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm alive. I'm here.
Yeah. So they're asking about your mom. Mom was
my mom, when the genocide started, my mom had already been released from the hospital. She was still on heavy meds, but she was at home. So yes, my mom survived. Thank God, she survived the genocide, but she passed away 5 years afterwards. After the genocide, she passed away in 1999 due to breast cancer.
Sorry. So you mentioned about the being shot. So where you were was the how do you call them? What's the name of the
Rebero?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, the Rebero, but I mean was it X4? It was X4. We're still fighting with. We're still trying to get into Rebero, as you guys.
Well, they had been removed from Rebero.
Yes.
But again, at that point in time, in April 1994, RPF had only, Sende as their base. They were in Rebero. But at the time, Rebero, it's like on the peak, and you have Monkigari on one side, you have Monjari on the other side. So all of them, they're just, and Kanjepe and Kimihurura, all of them, they're targeting, Rebero Mountain. They are just, bombarding it on a daily basis. So we had, because we were on the peak of mountain and every other XFAR, base was targeting the place, we were not supposed to cook during the day, because every time there was a smoke, then they would just, start sharing at that place. In that morning, it was early in the morning, me and my cousin, we got up and we went to fetch water to live in the room with the family. That means the water from the pool, because that's the water that we could be able to use only. So we were like, okay, let's get the water first in the room, and then we're gonna help. So we fetched the water quickly. Then he and we came back, and I started to, help feeding the kids. Remember, I told you, from people that were rescued from Nyanza, there were injured people. There were also people who had nothing, no scratch, no nothing. And among them, there were kids who was all alone. And when we were there, we had to feed them in the morning, so that they can have something in their stomach. And we're going to also eat, at the full night. So during the day, there was nothing. The only thing that we could drink was that water with the kind of like sweet powder we put in it. So it's early in the morning, just, racing to get those kids, fed, we are trying to get them fed quickly. And I'm standing up there because you come, from the restaurant, and you get up on the stairs, and I was standing on top of the stairs, and the kitchen was like in front of me, and I'm grabbing the bowls of soup, giving them to the kids, sending them back inside.
Yeah.
Then suddenly I felt, suddenly I started to cough. I felt like some type of, smoke in my chest, and I cough. As I'm coughing, there's blood that is coming from my right side. And as I'm trying to figure out what's going on, then I fell down on my knees. Then I'm on my side. As I'm on my side, there were two kids in front of me, and there was a guy who was sitting on my left side. He was sitting on the stairs, just, it's in the morning, he's just there chilling because there was nothing else for him to do. And as I'm on the ground, I saw him also on the ground, and I heard voices, talking about moving me from that particular spot. They moved me, and as they're moving me, I saw that the guy who was sitting on my left side on the stairs, they were trying to pull together his intestine. I could see that because they were all out. And when they moved me, there was another blast, like quickly, then I lost consciousness. The next time I came back to, it, I was in a different room, and I had people sitting next to me, talking to me, and I realized that at that point, my chest was bare naked because they had to remove my top and just, take care of my wounds. I had two of them on my right side where they had to take care of. Yeah. And I was asking for my aunt, and I got to be reunited with her at the end of the day. I was at Rebero for 2 days afterwards, and they removed me from Rebero to Gishushu. Then it's always kind of hard for me to recall the days I was at Gishushu, but that was the time I was all by myself. And I had nobody to help me with anything or in any way. And life wasn't, things were not easy because at that time I could not get up from my bed. So I always had I needed somebody to get me up. I needed somebody to give me anything. And I remember living in that house. There was a house we were in, Agishushu. I lived off of, People's Mercy, if I may say. So, and then I had to be taken to Jumba afterwards. And when I got there, I was reunited with my aunt's family. And I had a surgery in Jumba. And shortly after that, Kigali was liberated, and we had to come back. But again, my family came first. I came afterward. So that's briefly me.
Oh my God. Oh God. Yeah. It's a long, long journey.
Yeah, it is.
I'm thinking about the guy you mentioned, because our next question was about genocide prevention. So as now we're in a denial stage, with the Rwanda genocide against the Tutsi. With that guy you saw there, was he working in TV, on TV after genocide? Because I know you worked at the national TV. Was he also working?
I saw him. He was a technician.
Okay, I need to know, because now we are on genocide prevention with Gacaca. We are trying to unite Rwandans, all the steps that our country took to reunite people, and all the reconciliation programs and all these things. And you are in the midst of it, because at that time you were a teenager. You're growing up, and from your experience, how was that period changing over time and towards to where we are now? The things that stood out for you that you feel have helped in not having another genocide in the next 2 years, or there are countries that had genocide for years, it will stop and then another year will happen. So for us, it's been 30 years that we are rebuilding. We've had that, I would say, a privilege of rebuilding. So how has it been for you? What were your experiences?
Well, I should say after the genocide, I was a very angry kid. I was very angry.
Yeah.
And to me, for a few years, at least like 3-4 years, I could not stand the sight of a Hutu. To say, oh, you are a Hutu, trust me, for me, I didn't have anything to talk to you about. We had nothing to talk about, because to me, you were just that face of everybody. Because remember, after the genocide, I went back to Butare, my hometown.
Yeah.
Nobody was there. Okay. And to tell you that the genocide against the Tutsi was the worst of it, people were determined to erase the mere existence of who we were. Because if people decide to kill you, to destroy your house, and to destroy the pictures, that should tell you these are the people who were determined to make sure that your mere existence is completely wiped out from any history, anything that can remind you who you were or people you had. And I'm not gonna lie, going back home, finding, destroyed houses, but not to finding a picture, one single picture. I think that got me upset, and that got me mad for a very long time.
Understandably so.
Because it's one thing to lose a person. Even today, when you lose a friend, when you lose a relative, remember, do you notice how we tend to post pictures on our social medias? Those are the memories we're sharing, because those are the memories we're gonna keep with us after our people are gone. So now imagine, people have been killed. It's not like they were sick and they died. No, they have been killed, and whoever killed them also decided to burn any memory you could have of them, any reminder you could have of them. So I was a very angry kid for a very long time, but also me being angry. I think one thing that in my perspective, this is my personal opinion, I think the one thing that got us, where we are today is the fact that the government stepped in and stopped people taking revenge. Because people, survivors were not allowed to have their revenge. That I feel like
upset a lot of, not probably, definitely upset a lot of
exactly. So to me, that was an outstanding, decision from the government, because I was a child and I remember I was being upset. I was very angry. I was like, why people are not allowed to take their revenge if they can, And I remember my mom telling me that two wrongs don't make right, And I always told my mom, I'm like, her being so Christian is not a good thing. I'm like, Mom, you are very much of a Christian. You believe, you have such a strong faith in God that you don't realize that these people need to die. And my mom was like, because she looked at me one time, she was like, okay, let's say that you find people who killed our family and you killed them, then what? She was like, what's the point? You are going to become like them. You're going to take them their guilty and shame and their burden of what they did, and you're going to carry it with you. Why? Why should you do that? But again, I told my mom that she was such a strong, faithful into God, but I did not share her, beliefs at that point because I was angry. And my mom was like, I don't care how angry you're going to be, but find a way to deal, to manage your anger. But I'm not going to sit here and listen to you being angry and trying to seek revenge. And I might presume that I wasn't the only one being that angry, and I might think that I wasn't the only one feeling, that we should have had our revenge. But the fact that people were not allowed to have their revenge, it was one thing that saved us survivors from being like our perpetrators, like perpetrators who killed our family, number one. Yeah, number one. Number two, I feel like, because for who lived in town, or for us who moved from where we lived before genocide and live in a completely different area after the genocide, in the post, in the post-genocide era, we had it easy. For me, I feel like we had it easy because there were people, many people, by the way, genocide survivors who could not relocate, who could not leave their home country. Those, are the people who went back to their own houses. And guess what? These are the area where they were during the genocide, being hunted down by their fellow neighbors. And they had to go back to the same, areas, living in the same houses, living, next to the same neighbors who killed, their family relatives. Again, I always say that we had it easy because we didn't have to face those people on a daily basis. That's why during the Gacaca, one thing I was able to see, and to one extent, I felt like it was a little bit of, helpful and rewarding. It was the fact that these people who were living, next door to people who killed their family members, having these same people telling them where their family members are buried, where they were thrown. So that they could be able to exhume them and bury them in dignity. Okay, because that was the closure the survivors could have, in my opinion. Because there's nothing else you could do. So to me, the achievement of Gacaca, for me, it wasn't the justice, because there's no justice you can give to survivors. That's me though. That's how I feel. There's no justice you can give to survivors, but at least what they gave them, the Gacaca, what it gave to most of survivors, is the closure of knowing where their beloved ones were buried or were thrown, so that they can get them, clean them, their remains, and bury them where they know they can go and visit. When I think about Gacaca, that's what I think.
Yeah, and that's, thinking back to what you had just mentioned with your mom, about wanting revenge, about wanting some, I don't know if there was violent intent, but it's not a unique feeling, like I had said before. And these things, these genocides, these killings, they have ripple effects, because it's not just the horrific fact that it happened, but life doesn't just stop for survivors. It's like you and Dean, you had mentioned several times, seeing Hutu people, regardless if they had any part in the genocide, you had absolutely nothing. You wanted nothing to do with them.
And you have the fear. You don't know. There's no trust. How would you know? Like, I think that was the biggest question. Is, okay, not only I don't want to spend time with you, but how can I trust you? So there was a wall. I don't. So I think a lot of survivors, we shared that that feeling.
But it's an interesting question, because obviously you can't go out and retaliate by killing. That doesn't help. Doesn't solve anything, and you will be persecuted as well. Right.
Yes.
And so it's an interesting question. How do you move forward? How do you? What tools do you have when everything was taken away from you, and you feel like there's no other course of action than to get back?
How do you move forward? First of all, I don't know if it's only me, but I'm sure most of us realize that afterwards. After genocide, there was no time to think. There was no time to wonder. There was no time to try to make, to choose, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to, no. After genocide, the time was move forward. Because the country was rebuilding. And it was no longer only the genocide survivors in the country. You also had Rwandans who were coming back to their country, some of them to the country they never knew. that was the first time to be in the country. Now you have everybody coming home, trying to rebuild, trying to find, their new meaning and their sense of living this country. For us, we also had to do the same. And I usually say this because I feel like it's the truth. Because I was the only child to my mom, so my mom was the only person I knew growing up. She was my mom. She was my, my everything. And I heard her after genocide, at least for those few years. So I'll say that my world did not really, go so much upside down as many people did. If you were a child of my age and you lost everything, you lost everybody, and you had to find a way to navigate through life on your own, by yourself. Every time I think about having my mom for 5 years post-genocide, I feel like I was super privileged, in so many ways, because like I was saying, she always told me that I should never think about revenge. But there are many kids of my age who didn't have that privilege, that person to keep them grounded. For me, I had that person. But overall, what I can tell you, kids, there are many kids who did not have any type of guidance post-genocide. And the country was going on a fast pace, kind of rhythm. And it was either you go with the country or you're left behind. So there are many people, including adult survivors, who got left behind because they were trying to figure out who they were post-genocide without anybody else in their family members, anybody else they knew. Yeah. They got left behind because some of them, they were just, dealing with a very deep depression, PTSD. And at that time, nobody understood. When I say nobody understood, Rwanda had never faced with a genocide before. So means Rwanda had never faced with, I would say, a very large, population dealing with mental health issues. And they didn't know how to handle that at the time. Because when I talk about mental health issues, I want you to understand that the part of it was the genocide survivors, but also the other part of it was the soldiers. We don't talk much about the RPA soldiers of what they dealt with, but I want you to kind of imagine a young man, let me just take a random age, 25 years old. You are a 25 years old soldier, RPA soldier, who left your hometown, God knows which one. Either you were in Rwanda, or you came from Uganda or Tanzania or Kenya or DRC or Burundi, wherever you came from. But in that moment, 1994, you are in Rwanda, you are fighting the ex-FAR, but at the same time, you are jumping over dead bodies of Tutsi. People they're like you. And if you were in the country, you probably would be there as well. And you are fighting the enemy, jumping over dead bodies, trying to save those who are still living, who are still alive. You are trying to get off those guys who are raping women before killing them. So they saw a lot of things that nobody should be able to see. So this is a person that in the post-genocide era had to keep living.
Some of them couldn't.
But nobody ever asked him, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? How did you process what you saw? Right. Because there was no time for that. Not for them, not for survivors, not for everybody. The time, or what we had to do, was to make sure that we are going as the country is moving.
And stay alive.
And to stay alive. Yeah. So I always feel like how we did, Alex, to answer your question, how did we proceed? It's simple. It was one foot in front of the other. Yeah. Learning everything as we went. But I'm also not going to lie and say that everybody was on the same page. No. Because there are many kids who wind up in, drug alcoholism, and there were many, you know, people, women who got abused because they had nobody to stand up for them in different ways, you know. So there are many things, positive and negative, that happened, but the point or the goal was to make sure that we are staying strong.
Yeah.
And that's where the commemoration came in very, you know, came in handy every year, because that was the time the survivors had to kind of like sit and remember their their beloved ones. And that's why I feel like the commemoration was a time for us to reflect, you know, and everybody their own ways. But to answer you, how did we survive? How did we make it? It was one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know. After, even with all of that, you worked at a genocide memorial in Kigali. How was that? I know you've worn many hats, so and that's one of them. And as being a survivor and having gone through everything you went through, you're still dealing with your own. You're still on your own healing journey. Working at a genocide memorial. How was that experience for you?
Well, let me even tell you, before you went to work there, I was going there to cover, you know, news. I was a reporter before that.
Yeah.
And every time I'll go through the memorial running, I did not stand there to take a minute to see things.
Yeah.
And when I started to work there, it took me 6 months or so for me to stand in the children's side, like in the children's memorial. Because when I started to work at the memorial, my son was 8 years old. My daughter was 4 years old. And it was never a moment where I walked in there and see those kids' faces and don't see my kid. And to look at those pictures, because for those who have not been able to visit the memorial, when you get in the children's side, you have a picture of a child, and you have their names, and you have how they were killed, and you also have the information of what they liked to eat, or who was the favorite person in their family. And we are talking about from 6 months, 2 months to 5, 10 years. So when you look at those pictures and you see a 2, 3 months old baby who got killed because he or she was born a Tutsi, that makes you wonder. That makes you wonder. Where was the humanity?
That's what's wrong with humanity? You
ask yourself, if I'm being asked, or even if there is I might not be asked personally, but if there is a suggestion of forgiveness, how do I forgive a person who had no inkling of mindset to remind him or her that this person, 2 months old, is not really a person to kill because of who they were born to be? But then it dawned on me, I'm like, oh, it wasn't about the humanity. It wasn't about, being conscious of who they're killing. It was all about hatred. It's how the hatred, how deep it ran. That's how much they hated the Tutsis to the point of killing a 2-month-old baby simply because that baby is going to grow up to be an old Tutsi who will be smart enough to colonize you again.
I was very young And what you just said is what the perpetrators yelled at me, that I was maybe it would probably tell what you're describing, that I'm a child of a snake, and a child of a snake, it's a snake itself or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think they didn't care. They didn't care that you were a child or just what you would become.
For them, you're a snake.
Yes. Yeah.
For them, you are a snake because your parents are snakes. Therefore, you are a snake.
You are a snake. Yeah.
So
yeah.
And for them to leave you alive, that means allowing one more snake to survive so that it can bite them.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where working at the memorial at the beginning, my first 6 months, I could not stand it. I could not make a stop there. I would always go through like rushing, like quickly running through.
Yeah.
And I worked there for at least 8 years. So
8 years.
So I went,
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
I started to work there. So I went from a person who could not stand, be in a children's side, but to translate the testimonies. I went from being angry to be numb at what I was listening. Because if you're sitting and translating a testimony of a person talking for 2 hours, the horrifying things they went through. And it got to a point where I was like, maybe they were no longer human beings. Maybe they were no longer like, they didn't have the brain that works anymore. Because this is one testimony that got me. There was this young man, he was 20 years old, and he got locked. These women, they locked him inside the house, and they would be raping him over and over.
Women?
Yeah. And something that got to a point where at the first time I puked. Then when he got to a point where every time they want him to be up and just be ready for them and he couldn't, they would be using needles like on his thighs around his private part for him to get up and be ready. Then he couldn't. This twisted the whole thing that I had in my mind. I'm like, for the longest, I thought the women, they had the worst. But if this one is one of many guys who went through this, I don't even know what to think anymore.
I know, because if that men usually don't share. I mean, even women, it's hard for them to share when they went through rape. It takes a lot, and because we have there was a lot of women before who were able to share those stories, and we have few men who were able to share those stories. None of them shared, so it's rare to find men who are able to openly share those stories without being shamed. And so
for me, even today, when I think about that testimony, for example, it gives me goosebumps, because that was the time I had to take a break and think. I'm like, because this guy had to go through surgeries after the genocide, surgeries for the doctors trying to be able to make him healthy again, because I cannot even repeat things he said that happened to him here. I cannot. And to know that afterward he was raised by a lady who lost all her kids and her husband, and was that lady who was able to get him help and get him treated.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason that this guy was still alive. By the time I left Rwanda, he was married with kids, with a wife and kids. But that is one thing you get to do if you work at the memorial.
Yeah.
I was there as a communication person,
Yeah.
media person. But at the genocide memorial, you don't have one job to do.
No.
You have many things. You multitask.
Yeah.
And most of the time when you're multitasking, you get into testimony aspect of it.
Yeah, and they say,
so
sorry to cut you off. They say that when you listen to a testimony, to a witness, you become a witness. And so you are becoming a witness, not only just for your story, but now you're a witness to all those stories of all those people for 8 years that you were talking to. And
so
that can take a toll.
It does. Yeah. It does take a toll. But funny enough, didn't you know this? But when you work at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, it's no longer a job.
No.
It doesn't feel like a job anymore. It does not. That might sound weird for people, but it does not feel like a job anymore. It feels like a responsibility. It feels like a duty to make sure that whatever materials collected, they have to be preserved jealously.
Yeah.
They have to be preserved, because if they're not preserved, if they're not well protected, then you get to a point people will be like, oh, what you say, it never happened. But if you work at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, there is no way anybody can tell you that this never happened, because you have two things there. You have the testimonies of the genocide survivors, and you have the testimonies of genocide perpetrators. You don't only listen to what people who were being persecuted and killed and just, went through. You also listen to those who were hunting them like dogs did. And you sit and translate a testimony of a genocide perpetrator detailing on what they did. So you sit there and you listen to both. And over time, people can say all they want to say, but there is the truth that is engraved in your memory that nobody can take away. No. And I cannot change or exchange the time I worked at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center for anything. People may say, well, that was not healthy. I don't care that you think it wasn't healthy, but I felt like it was healthy for me, because the most important thing that I think I've learned is that whatever hell I think I went through, actually I did not.
Yep.
Actually,
what happened to me.
I did not.
Yeah.
There was somebody else who went through the worst ever.
Yeah.
So that made me feel like I'm here for a purpose.
Yeah.
I'm here not only to be the voice of those who cannot ever bring themselves to open their mouth and talk about the genocide, but I'm here to be their voice. I'm here to support them in any way that I can, and to make sure that the people we have right now saying that there was no genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, there were genocide against both. I'm here to say, no, you're gonna shut it, and we're gonna speak.
Yeah.
Because you had your time to do whatever you wanted to do.
You chose.
And if you want the truth, let me take you to the archives of, at the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, and help you listen to the testimonies of genocide perpetrators. I want you to sit and listen to what they say. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't an accident. It was something that was planned, and they had a plan. It's not like they woke up in the morning and say, oh, I heard that thought, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill him, I'm going to go home.
For years and years, they used the same studies that they were used in Holocaust, like step by step, like literally the 10 steps you just mentioned earlier. was the same thing they learned. They use the same books from Germany. So you're telling me that you had all these decades planning and putting together this genocide, and then you have survivors, you have churches that still, if you go to Nyamata, there is one of the churches there. What's the name of that church?
There is Nharama and Nyamata.
Nharama.
Both of them.
Yeah. So in Nharama, they still have the remains of people that was killed in that church. Like, and still, the bodies are still there, and you're telling me that it didn't have, and we're still.
It's not only that. You go to Kaduha, and when you're there with survivors, they take you into that memorial, and they will just look at this, preserved body, and they'll be like, oh, this is my mom, oh, that's my brother. And I remember being there, and whenever a person says, oh, this was my mama, this is my mom, because there is no was. It's a preserved body there, and they'll be like, oh, this is my mom. Trust me, the first time I heard that was 2007. And it took me a few months
to get back.
to be able to come back to understanding that a person can go there and be, oh, this is my mom, oh, that's my brother, because even if I'm a survivor, in that moment, I felt like I've seen nothing in my life.
Yeah.
So just to wrap it up, my experience at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center was learning. But also.
Well, that's important though. Oh, wait, we have a comment here.
Yes. It was Dadi, the Maximo brother. I remember that several young survivors were working at the memorial. How did you manage to overcome the grief while interviewing the genocide? Or after the
Dadi.
Or killing Tutsis? It's a really good question. It's pinned the questions so that you see.
I don't think we did overcome it. I don't think there was. Just to answer your question, Dadi, I don't think we did overcome anything, because there's no way you can overcome the grief. It's simply that you learn healthy mechanism to live with it, because you are surrounded by merely like evidence of the genocide, like things you cannot dispute. So what you do is learn best way to develop healthy coping mechanism to protect you from breaking, completely and fall apart. That's what I did. It doesn't come. It doesn't come, easily. It's not something you do just like that, but it's simply you learn over time. Because like Dadi said, most of the people who work, at least when I was there, most of the people who worked at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, they were genocide survivors. So they were genocide survivors who lived through that experience day in, day out.
When I had my first interview with a perpetrator, a genocidaire, it wasn't. I think I had like 3 of them in the same day, in the prison.
That should have been overwhelming.
No, I've had all these people surrounding me, and I had to do the job. So you're sitting there, you have to go through the entire process, and I didn't know how to you don't even know how to express what you're feeling. At all. I remember going back to the car. Everyone went to the restaurant to eat. I couldn't. And I didn't even have
to talk to them. And they were having another conversation.
Yes, they're having another conversation, and that was new. So everyone had been probably doing that, and for me, it was the first time. But I didn't think they had done it. I thought it was the first time everyone is experiencing what I'm experiencing, and I just kept to myself until I went home, because we were doing it in Kuchibuye. So that's far. It's like
Mobisesero?
Yeah, we're in Mississippi, and Andy was. But one thing that it really helped me, it was when I finished, listening to the perpetrators, and I think it kind of. it almost made it easy for me to be able to communicate with anybody else, if that makes sense. I think my communication patience skills were built on that day, but I don't think I mean I'll probably do it again, but that was probably one of the hardest things, like, to do, like, sit there and listen, and you can't even judge, you can't even, like, you just have to sit there and listen. And so yeah, it's very, very tough. And they know that you're a survivor, and some of them will get really mad because I made a mistake one time and went with I was wearing the purple bracelet. I know. I made the mistake. I didn't know.
What is that? Can you explain the purple bracelet?
It's commemoration. It's a never again. So it had the words never again, and I think, I mean, every perpetrator probably in Rwanda knows about that bracelet. So I made that mistake of going and wearing it, and the hatred. I didn't even receive it from the person I was interviewing. It was his family. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was almost those moments where you see, like, if some of these people actually got an opportunity to do it again, I don't think it would be hard.
Would.
Yes.
They would.
And that kind of got opened my eyes in the way that, yeah. I don't even know how it got to that, but it's hard. But
it's hard to stay. It's hard to be in that moment and stay neutral.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of also kind of the healing journey.
Yeah.
And moving forward, like we had spoke about earlier. That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question, Dee. Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe you have to make the choice at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I react in this particular situation?
Yeah.
I don't know how I would. I think we all have to think how we would feel in those moments.
Yeah.
But until you're face to face with it, I think you are faced with a choice on how do I handle the situation in the moment, and how will I handle these emotions moving forward? How will I, like you said, Yvonne, one step in front of the other?
Yeah.
That's kind of how you have to get through many moments in life.
Yeah.
And you don't have much time to linger on it.
No.
You can't sit up at night. I mean, I guess you could, but and think about, well, I'm going to be upset about this, or I'm going to compartmentalize and then make it this thing.
Yeah.
Where a lot of situations, it may be easier just walk past it and this is what happened, and
you can't change it.
Yeah, I'm not going to let it affect my mental health in any.
Yeah.
Or do my best not to have it affect my mental health in any negative way. Yeah,
I'm wondering, how did you get inspired to get into mental health as your profession? Now you're in Texas, you're living, a Texan life. You're helping a lot of other people, not just Rwanda survivors, but people from all over the world that you are sitting there on the other side and listening to them and helping, supporting. So was your experiences at the memorial and all your personal experiences that kind of, I don't know, what inspired you to do the work that you're doing?
Well, I would say that it was my experience at the memorial, but at the same time, my own experience that led me to feel like, hey, you need to do something. So basically, when I was a reporter, one time we were at the president's house for the press conference. So at that time, I had been experiencing some what I thought was panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And every time I would hear a very loud noise, I would just, jump. And then the next thing I know, I'm just, unconscious. I'm, hyperventilating. Just my life is becoming a mess. And there was nothing I could do about it. But again, because there was that, every time that we had a commemoration, you have people who have like the PTSD flare or in depression and anxiety and all that, and people say, oh, kanakaya hahamut. And uhahamuka became a very negative connotation, and it didn't sit well. So whenever it's, oh, hahamuk, it didn't seem like, oh, that person has, mental health issues and needs help. Oh, they will get help, but again, there was that negative connotation surrounding it.
Yeah.
So at that time, I didn't even know what was going on with me because every time they'll take me to the ER, they will just, drop me and they'll put me to sleep. And when I get up, I will just go back to my usual life, nothing changed. So that day I was at the president's house for conference, president's office for the press conference. Then there was interference of mics. So with the interference of mics, I kind of like lost it. So they had to get me taken care of. And the good thing, there was, doctors in the room. They helped me. But then I got lucky because then at that point I was, pushed into getting all the exams done. Because they were like, we have no idea what's going on with her. But the way she reacted, it might be something serious. So she needs to be, checked out. So I had all kinds of, exams done, including the EKG. So scan, CT scan, MRI, EKG, and all that were done. And then they were like, you need to see a psychiatrist. That was Dr. Nasson.
Oh.
So I went to see him. I had 2 sessions with him. But at that time, he wanted me to open up, and God knows I was not ready to do none of that. It was back in 2006, 2007. I was not ready to do none of that. I was like, sir, no, I'm not having this. This is not happening. He was like, well.
No, sir.
I was like, you want me to talk about things that I don't want to talk about? I'm not ready to talk about this. He was like, well, that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna talk about them regardless. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna talk about them. And I got really very upset. Then he looked at me. He was like, do you realize what is happening to you? I'm like, what is it? I just got scared all the time that something loud happens. That's it. Yeah. And he's like, so since when people who get scared, who get rattled by something, are taken to the hospital. Yeah. Since when that happens? If you think that's normal, I'm like, sir, I don't know what you are up to, but no. He looked at me. He had the experience of people in denial. So I wasn't the first, his first rodeo. So he looked at me. He was like, I got news for you. Let me help you understand. He was like, do you see when a builder builds a house, they have always to provide appropriate ways for the water to, come out. That's when even the roof, when they're building the roof, they have to make sure that the water comes from the roof, does not go into the house walls, because if they build the house without windows, without, way to get the water out, then whenever the water gets into the walls, it will make those walls, wet, and at a given time, the house will just, fall apart. Yeah, it is as simple as that. So that's why any builder who builds a house has to make sure that there is a way the air goes into the house, in and out, and there is a way to get the water out and to prevent water getting to the walls. I'm like, what are you getting at? I don't understand those, your story. He's like, it's simple. You're the house, but you are the builder, and the way you built your own house, you didn't give it away. You didn't provide a way to get the air in and out, or the water in and out. So everything has built up, and now your house is falling apart. And as a builder, you cannot even see it, but your house is falling apart around you. So if you want this whole conundrum you're in to end, you're going to have to find a way to rebuild your house, but appropriately. I was like, no, because what I understood was him telling me that I might be, one of those people
Oh, going crazy.
Bahamuka, they get just, you know, they get the panic attack, they who have PTSD.
Right.
And that was not a good name for me. That was not that was not a good ring for me. No, I was a strong woman.
Yeah.
I was very young, strong, and hardworking. So me, be a hardworking woman and very young and strong didn't align well. You know, the PTSD part didn't have a good ring on my name. No.
No.
Yeah.
No, they couldn't. You couldn't have those two together. No, they were not gonna. That was not gonna happen. I was in a very, very, you know, denial that I could not see beyond my nose, pretty much. So he looked at me, was like, I'm here. Whenever you need to talk, you know where to find me. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to talk to you, but yeah, I need medication, so you can give me medication. I was like, no, I'm not giving you no medication to numb your reality. That's not happening. So I'm laughing at it now. Because that was my story. And I remember between 2006 and 2013, there will be a time I'll have those headaches that will last like 4 days.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to sleep. And sometimes I'll have my flares of my PTSD flares, and I'll go for days unable to speak.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't make a sentence.
Yeah.
And there was a time it got so bad that I was taken to the hospital, and they jabbed me and they put me to sleep for many hours because the doctor looked at me and was like, Yvonne, I've never seen a hard-headed person like you. You are unable to speak literally, yet you're here telling me that you don't want no medication, you're okay. You cannot even make that sentence. So just to help you understand, it was with my PTSD that when I got to accept it, which was not long ago, it was back 2016, 2018, 2017. That's when I got to accept that I had a problem.
I'm so happy you did. Yes.
Yeah, somebody said the nightmares. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
DDA.
Oh, yeah. A lot of
sometimes I would just walk. I would just, you know, be sitting in a place, not being there. Literally, sometimes I'll walk not with my eyes closed, and people just walk with me so that they make sure that I don't get into anything that can hurt me. So basically, it was my own experience that made me realize that if it took me over a decade to accept that I have PTSD, then I don't know how many other people who are still in denial today. And even if they're not in denial, I thought that it is a privilege to understand mental health disorders and to understand how likely people with our experience can have those and not even understand what's going on with them, much less getting the help for it. So right now, working with people struggling with mental health issues, it's my way of gaining all that experience that I need so that I can be able to work with genocide survivors and help them. Because whether we like it or not, when you meet with somebody who walked your path and who is experiencing things that you know you are experiencing or you experienced before, sometimes it's easier for you to relate, or it's easier for you to accept the help that comes from that person.
Open up,
and give yourself permission to
share
and to heal. Well, I feel like also people, not just survivors, but anybody who is kind of on the fence, whether we feel like we need any sort of help, whether it's therapy or people to talk to. It's scary. It's a lot of fear, Because like you said, I mean, I think there's also that maybe there's shame, there's personal shame involved, where you don't want to admit to yourself that there is something very troubling, wrong, something kind of bubbling underneath the surface. Like you are very much aware of it when you feel that, but there's almost like this trick you have to play to give yourself permission to engage with that fear or engage with that anxiety or whatever it is you may be feeling. And I know for me personally, sometimes, I don't know, I feel like as I'm getting a little bit older, it's harder for me to slow down, allow myself the space to sort of feel things and admit to myself. I don't know why. When I was younger, in my 20s, it was easier for me to admit to myself when something was troubling. When I feel like I could feel myself approaching the edge, where I'm like, if I go any further, it's going to be a very slippery slope where I may have a panic attack, or I may get more reserved, and not speak to people and be to myself. But you have to give yourself permission. Sometimes you have to force yourself to stop and be like, okay, I'm not feeling the way I should right now. And it's okay to feel what I'm feeling now, but you have to give yourself the space and the permission to accept and feel these things.
I mean, to piggyback on what you're just saying, it's simple. It's the stigma that comes with the knowledge, the understanding, the fact that you are acknowledging it and accepting that something is wrong with you. And not only that something is mental health related. Because our mental health, our mental status means a lot to us, because it's part of who we are. To be reliable, like we know that if I'm mentally healthy, mentally stable, then I'm seen by who I am, a strong person, for example, a reliable person. But when you realize that probably you are struggling with mental health issues, then the stigma or the heaviness of the stigma kicks in, because you feel like, okay, I'm gonna be boxed in that box where people say, oh, that person with the anxiety they have, with the depression,
it's gonna be another title.
Exactly. So you focus much more on what comes with the stigma, or what the stigma to that issue means to the society, and what you do basically is to do your best to distance yourself. And this is like the first time ever I had said it publicly that I have PTSD. It's the first time ever, and we are almost 30. Usually this is something that I just discuss with my people that know me, close to me. But I felt like sometimes to be able to allow people to understand where you're coming from, or the reason why you're doing things, it's that. So it's not like I'm on that level where I feel like, oh, I can tell everybody that I have PTSD, but hey, guess what? I experienced the genocide. I got shot. I was, I was under fire for a X amount of time. So I wasn't the only one, because when it comes to us, you remember that you are not the only one. So it's not only your experience, if that makes sense. And we tend to kind of like minimize our experience and what that means. But me working in mental health, the knowledge that I have gained that is so crucial to understand is that our mental health is as much important as our physical well-being. So that means if I can be able to understand that a healthy mental health means being healthy overall, then we are on a good path. But it's sometimes something people miss, to understand that you can hit the gym every day of the week, not even 5 days of the week. You can hit the gym every day of the week. You can eat healthy as it gets. You can have a good social, surroundings. You might even be born in a very beautiful and healthy family. But if at certain point, you have experienced something that might trigger any mental health disorder you might have like dormant, or you might experience something that that kind of like damage your mental health, or just cause you to have mental health problems. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter that you have all that checked out and everything is in line. If your mental health is not as well taken care of as much as you hit the gym and you eat healthy and you make sure that you know how many calories that you put in your body and you don't put drunkenly and you just watch out on everything, let me tell you, you're gonna see yourself breaking down like
For sure.
like a collapsing building.
Well, and that's
because you
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because you have ignored all the clues you've had that your mental health needs, attention.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not for everybody, but if you look at someone's actions, like say if somebody, and again, it's not everybody, who's in the gym 7 days a week for like 3 hours, they may be in great physical shape, even though you should take rest days. But that might be an indicator that they might be running from something, or they might be using the gym or whatever activity. That might be their outlet. That might be their escape from something. Yeah. And if they stopped, if they did go to the gym 5 days a week, what would happen? Does that mean there's 2 days extra to face the thing that they may be running from? And we all have those things. Yeah. Every single one of us has that thing.
Again, when I mentioned the gym, it's because I wanted to give an example of something that we all crave for. We all just kind of like looking to say, oh, somebody's fit, somebody's healthy, blah, blah, blah. But I mentioned that to say, hey, it's not about your physical well-being that it's only important. It's overall you. Yeah. And one thing I also want to add, so that people understand, we all deal with mental health differently. And when we are treating mental health, because she asked me what I do. It's simple. One of the things that I do is assessment, mental health assessment. So when we do mental health assessment, it's literally to kind of like ask the questions that will give us a picture or a hint into your status when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to suicidal ideation, when it comes to overall your stress levels. Because when we ask questions related to anxiety, stress levels and suicidal ideation, it gives us a hint to, either you're depressed, and if you're depressed, how, what's the level of your depression? Is it mild? Is it moderate? Is it severe? Or is it extra severe? It gives us a hint into that. That goes to depression, that goes into your anxiety and stress. And if you have suicidal ideation, it also helps us to understand, okay, when was the last time you had thoughts, to hurt yourself? Do you have a plan to hurt yourself? Because when I know that you have a plan to hurt yourself, and the last time you thought about hurting yourself was 2 hours ago, then I have to refer you to the ER, because then you need a higher level of care. For example, that's one of the things that we do. Then if it's a person who needs like therapy, then you, with the assessment you've done, you can do more, like further down investigation assessment, which is more intake. Then you come up with a therapeutic approach to work with this patient, with this person. Because if I'm going back to the gym and all, there are people you find in the gym who know how to use every equipment to maximize the benefit they get from that equipment. And there are also those who come to the gym and they can use all the equipments, but not understanding how to maximize the benefit they get from that equipment, right? So that's the same thing with patients who come to therapy. There are people who understand their problem, who also can help the therapist to come up with a good approach, for their therapy, on how to, help them channel their problems and how to tackle them and manage them, efficiently and appropriately. And there are also those patients who come and they don't even know that they need therapy, and they have no idea how to kind of articulate their problems and their struggles. And that's how you kind of like, when you are working on a treatment plan, the same goes to both. But for this category of patients, when you are working on a treatment plan, that's when you can like help them to acknowledge, to notice things. Say, okay, this is, you talked about this, and I heard about you explaining this. What do you say about this? Is this one of the things you kind of like have been experiencing? And once you have been able to, kind of like pinpoint the issues, then you come up with a treatment plan that is according to the patient. Remember, the key word is every patient is different. There is no a blanket therapeutic approach to all patients, because you cannot, not all the patients are the same. So there is no one one therapy for all.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah, that actually is really good to know, because also it helps people to know that just because you have a mental health problem, it doesn't mean that your neighbor's mental health problem is the same as yours, so you shouldn't be, or your colleague, and you're still, feeling ashamed or whatever. You might have something different, and it's good to go check it out instead of, trying the same things as everybody else, because we are, even on the patient side, it's important to have that information that you just gave us, because it helps you also feel like, okay, I'm feeling this way, but my friends won't just be I can talk to them, but I still need that professional help for somebody to do the, the assessment and help me out. Especially in this country, there are numbers that you can call. There's I think it's excluded now in some insurances, health insurances now. It just, people are not using it.
Well,
it's hard. Again, there are people who are willing to use those hotlines because they know it helps. But again, I want to stress the fact that the stigma that comes with mental health, because I just mentioned about PTSD, I just mentioned about depression, stress, suicidal ideation, but I'm not talking about other mental health disorders. I'm not talking about bipolar, I'm not talking about schizophrenia, I'm not talking about phobia, I'm not talking about addiction, which is also now a mental health disorders. I'm not talking about all other mental health disorders that actually, some of them, people have nothing to do with how they got it.
No.
Some of them, they might be genetic. It's something that you get from your parents, your ancestry, genes. And the only thing you see, sometimes there is onset, and that's where people start to realize that you have a problem.
yes.
There are those that have no explained, reasons for what they, people get them. And it's one thing that gets so stigmatized, because let me put an example. Again, it's not only that, but it's one example. If somebody has a schizophrenia, if the person has a schizophrenia and he hasn't had, this person has not been diagnosed with schizophrenia, for example. In my country, which is also not exactly the same thing in America, but in my country, this person, if the person has a schizophrenia and untreated schizophrenia, you'll find these people talking to themselves on the street, having a full-fledged conversation with themselves. Guess what? They're not talking to themselves because they have, hallucinations. And they have audio hallucinations, or sometimes they have audio-visual hallucinations. They can hear voices and they can see people, and you have no idea what's happening because you cannot see what they see, you cannot hear what they hear. And they're having a full-fledged conversation. They're talking back and forth. They're just gesturing because what their disorders is making them see and hear, you have no clue. But because this person has not been diagnosed, we're going to start making assumptions. Oh, that person's crazy. Or that person, has been poisoned. Or that person's, you don't know this, Alex, but where are we from? There was a very old tradition of like praying to gods in my country back, all Kuraguza, Kubangwa, all those, traditional I would say cultural, practices that are not entirely, you cannot really entirely understand what comes with it. Sometimes people say it has the juju in it, and there is kind of like
Voodoo.
sorcerers and everything, but I'm not sure about that. I cannot tell you about it. But if this person comes from a family where they have been having those practices, kubandwa, kuraguza, all that, they'll say, oh, that's the benefit. That's because of what his family or her family has been doing. But guess what? Schizophrenia has nothing to do with kubandwa or kuraguza. It's simply a mental health problem that comes, genetically. There is no any external thing, it's just genetic. So you understand? Then that person gets so stigmatized. I'm sorry, that's Eugenie. She's saying.
I didn't know that she was here. Hello, Eugenie.
Alex, Divina needs to explain. So Eugenie said that Bamuteja Mahembe, it's one of the things that they say in those sorcerers practices that you can send, those bad juju to people.
Oh.
But if you...
All right.
So basically what I'm trying to say, a person with schizophrenia or bipolar who has not been diagnosed, for example, they might have all this experience and, people come up with all explanations that have nothing with science, that have nothing to do with mental health issues, simply because nobody knows. But whenever you get this person to be diagnosed, there is medication that can manage the disorder. But it's all about the stigma that comes with it. Mental health still has this heavy stigma around it that people are not necessarily forthcoming with their issues, with their problems. But when it comes...
It's a universal thing. And that's why, again, these conversations are so important. That's why the work that you do and other healthcare practitioners, experts. This is why this work is so important. Because one size does not fit all when it comes to mental health, like you said, both of you have mentioned. And the more conversations that you have surrounding it, I think the better off we are. But you're absolutely right, though, is attacking these stigmas that are attached to it. It's hard to approach that. It's hard to really engage with someone in this conversation because it's not like a broken arm where you can just put it under an x-ray and see very clearly that it's a broken arm. And there's usually a protocol, right, to handle that broken arm. You set the bone, you get it wrapped up, you get the medication, then you heal. The mental health, it could look any different way. You can be going through the same thing. Two people with depression may not operate the same way. Two people who with substance abuse issues may not handle it the same way. And so again, that's why these conversations and this work is so vital to I think the progression of
humankind.
Well, maybe that's kind of a broad stroke term, but it's true. I mean, I think that's how we become more emotionally intelligent and honor people and believe people when they say I'm having issues. I'm not feeling well. And listen, and if you can't give the answers, then at least guide them to directions where they can perhaps we can heal or begin
get the right help.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yvonne, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours.
Do you have some words of wisdom?
Yes, that was my next
you would like
question.
to you would like you can ask.
Do you have any words of wisdom or parting wisdom to anybody, survivor or otherwise, would like to either offer help to people who need mental health help or just navigating the world in the way that you have? I mean, what words of wisdom that would you give those people?
Well, Alex, I don't know if I can tell people to do what I did because if I'm being honest, there was a long time that I numbed myself to many things and I had to push through the pain. I had to push through all those things. So, if I'm being honest, it wasn't the healthiest way to do things because the depression, anxiety, stress, those are the silent thieves. That's what I call them personally. Why do I say that? It's simply because most of people, most of us, we struggle with stress, depression, and anxiety without even being aware of it. And if you are coming from where we're coming from, depression, anxiety, and stress, they're excuses. They are not taken seriously. It's like means like you are just, being spoiled. That's, that's not a big deal. And that is the problem that comes with many people dealing with horrific thing like a genocide all at once. And afterwards, everybody's hurt. So basically, your pain is not as great as any other because it's your pain and I have mine, and just, we have to keep going. And that also boils into the fact that in our culture, expressing the thoughts that we have, the pain that we go through, it's not as easy as in many other cultures, I think. So we are not encouraged to express them. That's why most of the time we keep them quiet. And that's why I call depression, stress, and anxiety silent thieves, because they steal our happiness, our joy, because people focus on the bigger picture, so to speak. That means the bigger picture is education, work, family, whatever that is supposed to, that the society is expecting us to achieve. And we kind of tend to ignore the heaviness or what the depression is doing to us. And before you know it, you find people so quiet. You find people so sad all the time. You find people not having the joy of, in doing anything ever again. They can do everything, they can achieve so much, but they're not happy anymore, Or you see them going through some painful thing. Let me put one thing just into perspective. You might find a woman is being married. They have everything that any woman can, expect to have in a marriage, for example. But then you find them unhappy. You know why? Because probably the husband who is providing all that comfort is not there. They provide the comfort, but they're never there. They're never at home, because they're busy providing. But the woman apparently is not allowed to complain about the husband never present at home. Because how can you complain that your husband is never at home when he's providing for your family, for example? And probably this is a woman who is a genocide survivor with nobody else to talk to, with nobody else to cry to. So what do you expect this woman to do? Because basically, she cannot go out there complain about not having her husband when there is another person there who's having hard time to even put the food on the table. You understand? But here, we remind people that it's okay to voice your concern, to express whatever that it's making you feel unhappy. Because maybe by expressing it, there is a way or there's a chance that they can have an answer to that. So basically what I'm trying to say, it's hard to tell people how to navigate their mental health problems. And when it comes to genocide survivors, it's very hard to tell them how to navigate that because it's individual experience. But I'm going to say this. I said this recently, and I'm going to repeat this. For us survivors, it's okay to cry. We are allowed to feel the pain, but we are not allowed to lose hope. We are allowed to be angry and upset every time we remember our loved ones that we lost untimely. But we are not allowed to lose the sight of keeping their memories alive at all times.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because for me, like I said, working at the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center reminded me something or instilled something in me. Working there, doing everything that we did and everybody else, mostly survivors, it wasn't a job. It was a responsibility and a duty for survivors to make sure that what happened during 1994 and prior to that is never forgotten. That every fact that is available to us, every archival material that we have that proves that what we say is true is never lost, so that whenever all these genocide deniers come front and say, oh, nothing happened, we'll be like, okay, we're not going to argue with you because that would be a waste of breath and a waste of time. But hey, here are the facts, deal with that. But it's because there were people who were willing to sit in those walls to collect those testimonies that the dean was talking about from perpetrators, to collect the testimonies of survivors, however painful they were, and to sit and translate them, digitize them so that they can stay alive forever. Going from the tapes, the VHS tapes, to the digital, capacity.
Yeah.
So all that work was done so that we can keep this, facts and history alive and to make sure that that's not forgotten. Now, I always say that I don't have wisdom because I think I'm not a wise woman.
What was that about?
That sounded a whole lot like wisdom to me.
What was that all about?
But yeah, our responsibility, me being here today, it's a privilege to meet with you all, the two of you having, sitting for all this time talking. It's not because I have something important to say, but it's simply because anything that we can be able to share is a wealth of information we're leaving behind.
Yes.
It's education and awareness. And I think we survivors, especially survivors of genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, and of course coming on the heels of Holocaust survivors, we are doing our best to make sure that we raise our voices to kind of like raise this awareness for people to understand and to educate people without shoving down their throats facts that are irrelevant or unfounded, but just providing facts that are there for people can, find.
We feel so blessed to have you, to speak to you and listen to you, and not only just share your story, but also the things that you've learned along the way, in this short life that you've lived. But thank you so much for the courage you had, and you still have to be able to share these stories. Like you mentioned earlier, there are people who are not able to not even look in the mirror and tell themselves what they went through. Not let alone to talk to another person, another human being about what they went through, but also to even talk to themselves about what they went through. And so thank you for all the work that you're doing and all the people you're going to be helping in the future as well, because I know you're getting started. So and so I'm excited where our journey. I'm you know how we met? We were both sharing our story on the same panel. We both worked at the same museum, but we didn't meet until we were Boston. Yeah. So let's keep it up.
Yeah, what a journey!
Yeah.
Thank you.
I echo the same sentiments. I couldn't have said it better myself. But no, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And educating myself. I'm the dean. I'm sure you learned stuff.
I've learned so much. Oh yeah, trust me.
Yeah, but everybody who tuned in as well. The entire base range community and onward. I'm sure your words
Yes.
reached at least a few of them, so I'm sure they're going to
They will reach more.
leave this conversation learning something
Yeah.
about humanity, about how to treat one another,
Yeah.
and about, you know, hopefully some better coping mechanisms,
Yes.
and healing strategies for mental health,
Absolutely.
and everything else regarding that. So thank you so very much once again. I hope we didn't take up too much of your wonderful
I had
Sunday.
promised only 1 hour, but
No, that's all right.
it was too good.
You
It
good.
was too good.
You good.
Thank you.
I'm okay.
You're okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month.
Yeah, we'll see you
Yeah.
next month.
Yes.
And for everybody who stuck with us for the entirety of this conversation, you all are the real MVPs. And we love you all, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye.